بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله نبينا وإمامنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Lesson tonight is on wal-Marjan فيما اتفق عليه الشيخان, compilation of hadiths from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, one of the most beneficial books that have been summarized and compiled in a manner to benefit someone who doesn't have the time or the ability or even the desire to go directly into Sahih Bukhari or directly into Sahih Muslim. A book which is unfortunate that it hasn't been explained. It's fortunate for us, alhamdulillah. Allah chose us for it, alhamdulillah. But it's unfortunate that a book that's been out for such a long time has never been explained or any commentary made on it. And look at all of the other classes and lectures that people do and books that people talk about and push and propagate. You ever had a class on this or anything like this? And this book's been out for a long time. And it's a compilation and a summary of two of the most authentic books of hadith. The two most authentic books of hadith, Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So wal-Marjan is a very important book and it's a very powerful tool and strong weapon, bi-idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the talib al-ilm, for the scholar, and also for the da'iyah, for the murabbi, the muallim, the teacher in school, and also for the day-to-day Muslim, the mother, the father, the coach, the big brother, the stepfather, etc. Because it's a quick reference that you can go back to for totally authentic information on a topic that you need. And alhamdulillah, through all the different classes that we've been doing over the years from this book, how many things have we discussed and came up? How many subjects? The Sharh Nawawi, all types of gems and golden nuggets, and to base your fiqh and your foundation off of Bukhari and Muslim. That's the asl. And if the brothers who come to the masjid or the viewers online, if you notice, alhamdulillah, we try our best with our shortcomings to do an entire khutbah based off of what? One authentic hadith. Directly, that's the key. Directly from Sahih Bukhari. Directly what? From Sahih Muslim. And then from there, you branch out. And this concept, and this sharh, and that, and then how this pertains to, and so on and so forth. So the concept is starting off with a strong foundation and having good quality ingredients. Good quality ingredients. So that is one of the reasons why wal-Marjan and any other book that pertains to Bukhari and Muslim is always going to be a winner. Always going to be a winner. Everyone understand this? Because your foundation is, there's no dispute or fight over your asl. Which direction you go, how you take it, how you stretch it, how you slice it and dissect it is one thing. But your foundation is what? Is going to be, inshallah, agreed upon. And that's a heck of a starting point in a race. If you can start off on a good what? Good strong pace. Everyone understand this? Khairan, inshallah. Sometimes you may start off so strongly that you don't need to finish that strongly. You might do so well early on, and it's what? You understand this? For argument's sake. For argument's sake. So wal-Marjan is a very important book, and all of you guys should be studying it, reading it, and referring back to it. Alhamdulillah. And we've covered quite many hadiths by now, or a good number. We're almost at 500 hadiths. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless you all. The chapter is chapter number 49. He says, Babu tartil al-qira'ati واجتناب الهذ والإفراط في السرعة وإباحة سورتين فأكثر في ركعتين. The main lesson or the main subject of discussion tonight is ترتيل القراءة. It says to recite the Quran in a slow, clear style. In a slow, clear style. And to avoid from reciting it very quickly. Number 3, and it is allowed to recite 2 surah or more in 1 rak'ah. 2 or more surahs in 1 rak'ah. 2 or more surahs in 1 rak'ah. So when we talk about the night prayer, because all of this is still talking about the night prayer, and that which springs forth from the night prayer, and based off of the night prayer, even though it's applicable to the daily prayer too as well. Naam Abdul Qawi? But this is all the discussion of the Quran and the details of its recitations and rulings is all coming from what? When we start getting into witr and qiyam, so on and so forth, right? So from the adab and the ahkam of reciting the Quran is, number one, the speed. How fast are you allowed to recite the Quran? That's number one. What's the speed limit on the Quran? Number two, what is the preferred speed and which one should recite? And is there a minimum? What's meant by fast? Fast in which is relatively fast, or fast in which you change the meanings and break the recitation until it's just can't, it's undiscernible. What's meant by that? Last but not least is how much Quran you can recite in one rak'ah. How much Quran one can recite in one rak'ah. Every single Muslim, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, especially hopefully if you're watching these videos, or even a non-Muslim watching these videos, tuning in, you know the basics of the salah, the basics of prayer. And I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, know much more than just the basics. Much more than just the basics. So if you know the basics, and you know more than the basics, it is always going to benefit you to finely tune everything. And all of the things that you've done or that you do or you see people doing, you never ever knew the dalil for, or there was even an issue, now you're learning and filling in those gaps. Everyone understand this? You're learning and filling in those gaps. Everybody clear on this? A class in which was taking a salah from 0 to 60, A to Z, is one thing. But we're dealing with people that already have a what? The basics and more of the salah, whether it's from HadithDisciple or other than HadithDisciple, with regards to the prayer, right? So now we're finely tuning some of these issues. With regards to reciting the Quran in the salah, is it permissible for me to recite 2 surahs? Or am I only allowed to recite 1 surah? Also, the concept of reciting the Quran and the people who recite the Quran, the Qurra. Is there a culture of Quran reciters? And are there rules of reciting the Quran? Is there a field of expertise, al-qira'ah or qira'at, that is beyond the jurisdiction of the Sunnah? We said this before. And many people, they think that. Is that the culture of reciting the Quran and the field of expertise of reciting the Quran is beyond the Sunnah. It says he's a muhaddith and he's a qari. So they have different rules. The qari he does certain things, he can say certain things, there's certain practices that they have, which there's no hadith needed for it. Because it's what the Qur'an do. And we've explained that that's wrong. That's what? That's wrong. The rulings of the Quran are based off of the hadith. Everyone understand this? What you can and cannot do as a reciter, what you shouldn't do as a reciter, is not beyond the reach of Bukhari and Muslim. And we've explained this before, the superiority of the sciences of hadith over all other sciences of Islam. That's the top and the best. And without hadith, there are no other sciences. Everyone understand this? There's no aqidah without hadith. Ahlul Hadith in the past were the followers of the Salaf al-Salih. They were Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. You understand this? That's why they were called Ahlul Hadith. Aqidatu Ashab al-Hadith. The Qurra and the different innovations that they make and the false practices that they have is because they feel or they think that the culture of reciting the Quran is what? Is different than the rulings of Bukhari and Muslim. That's wrong. So you may do something which is in Bukhari and Muslim, and a person of the Quran or a reciter, he may say, you can't do that. You can't recite a surah here that's there. And one verse or one surah you recited, Surah Al-Buruj. And in the second rak'ah you recited Surah Al-Baqarah. Someone may say, you can't do this. That's not good to do that. You should stay in order of the Mus'haf. And he's absolutely wrong. And he himself may do something which isn't found in the Quran and Sunnah, such as saying Sadaqallahu al-Azim, or reciting the Quran together in one voice, etc. And you may say to him, is this Sunnah? Is it permissible? He says, Akhi, la, you don't understand, yani. This is well known among the Quran reciters. We do this. It's well known practice among us. As if it's a different ruling, a different legislation. Everyone understand this? So what you can and cannot do regarding the Quran and its recitation, what you should and should not do with regards to the Quran and its recitation is only based off of what? The hadith, the sunnah, the legislation. And I cannot explain in words how important this principle is. And there are many innovations that have come and popped up and sprung up through not understanding this what? This principle. Not understanding this what? This principle A perfect example of this, or a worldly manifestation, is Quran teachers, and how people mistreat Quran teachers, and oftentimes don't want to pay them, or pay them a trifle, a measly amount of money. And they'll say that you're a Quran teacher. You're not supposed to take money. You can't have a salary. Because of the hadith, would you like a bow of fire? He who uses the Quran to eat with is not from us, so on and so forth. They'll bring these baseless, bogus hadiths, and in which they have their own culture that the Quran teacher should just be what? Balash, yani. Right? Majanan. In other words, without anything. But the actual hadiths in Bukhari and Muslim clearly support inna ahaqqa ma akhadtum alayhi ajran kitab Allah. The thing that you deserve most to be paid for is what? It's the book of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ told them. The thing which deserves the most ajr. Not it's permissible to take a reward for it. No, he says inna ahaqqa. The thing, if you want to get paid for anything, it should be what? For that Quran. Everybody understand this? Tahseen. Everybody clear on this? So this is a manifestation, and how it goes to show you how worldly problems lead to not understanding this principle. The rules of the Quran are Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Muwatta Malik, etc. That is the Quran culture. And what they choose to practice, and what isn't that well known, what they really don't do, as long as in the boundaries of what? The Sunnah. So, an example of this, students of Medina, it's well known, not all of them, but many of them, they wear their thobes high, trimmed at the middle of their shin. Right? Some even higher than that. That's the Sunnah, without a question. And the hadith clearly supports that with regards to the izar of the believer, where it should be. That is the Sunnah. That is the Sunnah. That's Muhammad's Sunnah. It has nothing to do with Salaf Salih or being Salafi. That is Muhammad Sallallahu words. Izratul mu'min ila nisfi saqayhi. The izar of the believer is where? At the middle of his shank. But it's not obligatory. You don't have to have your thobe that high. You don't have to have it what? That high. It's not wajib. Now, how low can it go? Beneath the ball of the ankle or not? We know that it cannot go beneath the ball of the ankle. As the Messenger of Allah has also told us, that any part of the izar below the ankle is in the fire. And it has nothing to do with being Salafi. That's the Muhammad's words. That's what? Muhammad, many people, they think it's just a special thing. That's hadith. That's Islam. Everybody clear on that? It's not no special exotic dawah to follow the words of Muhammad. Everybody understand what I'm saying to you? But it's well known the students of Medina, many of them, this is their preference. And it has become a cultural norm to them. You go overseas, you get your thobe made, you have what? A high thobe. And if some people want to have it lower, that's also what? Fine, as long as it's not beneath the ball of the ankle. Right. So the culture of those students is to have it what? High up. That's fine. So if the Qur'an, if they have a cultural, some things that they stick to and they become famous among them, it's in the boundaries of the Sunnah, that's what? That's tayyib. This is what we do as Qur'an reciters. That's fine. But the moment it goes outside of that circle, it's a problem. And in the moment you have your own set of rules, just because it's the Qur'an and the Qur'an reciters, then that's what, Mukhtar? That's a mushkila. And that's what happens in what? Most cases. That's what happens what? Most cases. Everyone understand this? The muhaddithin, the people of hadith, they're well known for wearing henna in their beards. They would all put in henna in their beards, so on and so forth. And there's one person, or there's another group, let's say the scholars, once again, of the Qur'an. They says, we don't like henna. Or we don't have no problem with it, but it's just, all of our teachers all have what? Natural gray. It's fine. It's well known that the Quran reciters they don't like to use henna. It's not haram. It's not obligatory. Everyone understand this? But now we can sing, we can do this, and we can say this, and recite it so many times, and you have to say this every time you're finished. That's a what? That's a problem. And someone brings to you the dalil, and they say, no, you stick to what? Stick to hadith. We're a Qur'an. Now that's when the problem comes. Everybody clear on this? So the hadith, the legislation of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is dominant over all other fields and disciplines. We all clear on this? So is it permissible to recite more than one surah and a rak'ah or not? What the Qur'an do, what the Imam of the Masjid does, has nothing to do with the permissibility or the lack of permissibility in the what? In the hadith and the sunnah. Everyone understand this? Everybody clear on this or not? طيب خير إن شاء الله. Moving forward. حديث ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال أو عن أبي وائل أنه قال جاء رجل إلى ابن مسعود فقال قرأت المفصل الليلة في ركعة فقال هذا كهذ الشعر لقد عرفت النظائر التي كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقرن بينهن فذكر 20 سورة من المفصل سورتين في كل ركعة. Hadith number 470 is narrated by Abu Wa'il, Shaqiq ibn Salama, Mukhadram. He was someone who died, or he was someone who was alive when the Prophet ﷺ was alive. But he never met him. He was a Muslim. It's called Al-Mukhadram. Al-Mukhadram. Those who were Muslims during the time of the Prophet, but never physically met him. So they did not become companions. And some say that he was at the outskirts of Medina when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. He was very close to being a companion. He narrated that once a man came to Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, and he said, I recited the Mufassal Surah, or the Mufassal Surahs, at night in one rak'ah. Ibn Mas'ud said, this recitation is too quick, like the recitation of poetry. I know the identical surah which the Prophet ﷺ used to recite in pairs. Ibn Mas'ud then mentioned 20 Mufassal Surah, and he keeps saying the same thing in English. He keeps saying surah, and that's wrong. That changes the meaning. It's not surah, it's what? If you transliterate a word into English, it keeps the same ruling as plural or singular. So if you use hadith, you have to say hadiths. You have to say what? Hadiths with an S. Unless you're going to put in the word ahadith. And in a glossary or your index or your table, your chart conversion, ahadith is the plural of hadith. But you can't use the word hadith in English as an English word, and the word in Arabic, the text, the ayat, talking about 5 or 10 hadiths. Now you've changed the what? Meanings. Look carefully. It says, a man came to Ibn Mas'ud and said, I recited the Mufassal Surah. He says, Qaratul Mufassal al-Laylata fi rak'atin. What's meant by al-Mufassal? The surah, al-Mufassal surahs? Or he's talking about one surah that's called Mufassal? Moving forward. He says, I know the identical surah which the Prophet used to recite in pairs. What surah is recited in pairs? I know the identical what? Surahs that he recited in pairs. That's wrong. That changes the meaning. He then says, Ibn Mas'ud then mentioned 20 Mufassal Surah. Surah is not plural of what? In Arabic or English. This is wrong. Surah in Arabic, obviously, and you can use that in English. Or you have to put a what? An S, and you have to say surahs. If not, it takes you back to what? That's wrong. That's a mistake. Moving forward. It says here, in parentheses, i.e. those surah which begin with Hamim, outside of parentheses, which the Prophet ﷺ used to recite in each rak'ah, Sahih Bukhari. There's no point in putting water under the bridge. That's already well known. All right, let's break down this hadith now. Before we get into what this hadith means, right, and what we benefit from it, the first thing we have to do is what, Alameen? I'm attacking you tonight. What's the first thing we got to do? What's the first step in understanding this hadith properly?
The point of the hadith, what is it trying to tell us?
Something that's crucial from the beginning. What's the first step in understanding this hadith?
Context?
What is the context that we're looking for? It's one specific point.
Historical?
Not one thing.
How do we say?
No, السؤال بالعربي.
يعني لكي نفهم هذا الحديث فضلا أن نطبق مفاده ومراده، ما الشيء الذي يعني يتوجب علينا أن نركز عليه، نحدد أنظارنا عليه، يعني حتى يكون لنا فهم صحيح. Not the chapter heading. Something in the hadith.
What is the mufassal?
There you go. What's meant by المفصل؟ ما المقصود بالمفصل؟
من سورة قاف إلى
هكذا. كيف نقسم؟
نعم المفصل من سورة قاف
طيب.
إلى الناس.
جزاك الله خيرا. He says that mufassal, before we go to where it starts and ends, what is mufassal? What's that term mean? That's why I came at you first, because I taught you this some years back. I did. Indeed, I did. I was in the city of the Prophet ﷺ, and you were in Brooklyn, in the marketplace. Tell you. All right, tell you. It's several things now. We have the Quran, the Kalam of Allah, Azza wa Jal. And obviously when the Quran is written down and is preserved on paper, we call it the what? Tayyib. The Mus'haf / the Quran. Was it sent down in order from Al-Fatiha to Nas? It was not. Was every single surah sent down all at once? Some were, for sure, but not all. So how did the Quran or the Mus'haf become in the order in which we have it in today? It was placed where? In order. It was placed what? In order. Was it by the Prophet? Some say. Was it by the companions? Some say. What's important is that it's all the kalam of Allah. It was all sent down by Allah. How was it organized and arranged? Different discussion. Everyone understand this? And anyone who reads the Quran, he's going to clearly see is that there are short surahs and then there are what? Long surahs. There are really, really, really short surahs and there are what? No, really, really long surahs. Everyone understand this? And then there's some surahs which are what? In the middle. So what is the way of governing, or what is the way of discerning which surahs belong where and which should be recited in the salah? It's not the sunnah to recite this long surah in the salah. What's the definition of long in Salat al-Maghrib? What's the definition of short in Salat al-Isha? There has to be rules. Everyone understand? It has to be what? It has to be a gauge. Everyone understand this? And the surahs, obviously, they're going to be similar. The translator use identical in length and style. In what? Length and style. So how do we break it down? Let's make an example of this. It has nothing to do with the Quran or Islam or religion. This is just a simple practical example. You have a meat. Let's say beef. You like beef. What type of beef do you like? There's ground beef, there's steak, there's chuck, there's roast, there's so on and so on and so forth. But it's all from a cow. So you go to the butcher shop or the market or wherever you're going, and you want something special for your guest tonight. I want a roast, or a ribeye, or ribs, or ground beef, or this, sirloin, New York strip steak, etc. Right? How do you know which piece or what part of the cow? Unless the butcher has what? The butcher don't have the chart. The butcher himself knows it, but you need the what? The chart. The shoulder, the leg, the belly, this, the back, the ribs, and it goes to show you what's called what. What is prime? You understand this? What's chuck? What's sirloin? What's strip? What's that? It's the cow is what? Into different what? Sections and different sizes as well. Different sizes and what? Sections. Everyone understand this? Different sizes and different what? Sections. And the size and the sections which are similar are always going to be similar. Everybody clear on this or not? Everyone understand this? So Surah Al-Fatiha, long or short. Surah Al-Baqarah, long or short. Surah Ali Imran, long or short. Is Ali Imran similar to Baqarah or not? Is Alam Tara or Washamsi wa Duhaha? Is that similar to Wal-Layli Yaghsha? Everyone understand this? How is it paired and how is it similar? How is it broken down and branched into pieces and sections? Let alone what is the sunnah of Dhuhr, of Asr, of Maghrib, of Isha, or Fajr. Everyone understand this? Everybody clear on this or not? Clear? So let's say you're feeding someone who used to be a vegetarian. He's coming over your house for dinner and he used to be a what? A vegetarian. He's never had meat, let alone steak. You're not going to introduce him into what? A tomahawk ribeye, a slab of beef. The butcher's going to say, get him a what? Salisbury steak. Something. Get him something what? Thinner and smaller. Everyone something more what? Manageable. And then we have another person who's a meat eater, a meat lover, a connoisseur of steak. He's going to say, what? Take this cut. This is the finest cut I have for you. Bang. Everyone understand this? Everybody get it or not? It's broken down. It's a rating of the meat and the types of meat. And it's similar. Everybody clear on this or not? How many guests do you have? He says, I have 6 people coming. Take this. I have 10 people coming. This is what you need. I have 1 person coming. Man or a woman. What type of appetite do they have? Whack it, man. Everybody clear on this or not? What's the proper etiquette of serving your guests what? Cow meat. Everybody can see the example I'm trying to make or not? Oh, you brothers hungry. Tell you. Everyone see the example I'm trying to get to? So the Quran and its surahs, not the ayat, because the ayat were arranged by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the Quran and its surahs, and those surahs being placed into order and being categorized, it has to be a what? A system. And that's what the word mufassal is pertaining to. That's what the word what? Mufassal is pertaining to. Everybody clear on this? That's the first step of this hadith. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says regarding this. قال العلماء أول القرآن السبع الطوال. Nawawi says that the scholars of Islam, they say the first part of the Quran is called what? Nope, not just a tiwal, it's something else. It says what? As-sab'u tiwal. The 7 longest. That's the first section. The 7 longest surahs, which are what? Baqarah, Al-Imran, An-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah. What's after?
الأنعام.
Al-An'am, aywa. Badain,
الأعراف.
Al-A'raf. How many is that so far? That's 7. That's what? That's 7. The long 7. He then says, Thumma dhawatul mi'in. He says, then the surahs that have 200 ayat. Roughly, give or take. Or not even that. Al-an. Not even what? 200. But of what? هذا هو 100 and not 2. Everybody clear on this? Mi'in. Plural of mi'ah. طيب. Everybody clear on this? Such as what surahs? What's after Araf? Al-Anfal, Tawbah, Yunus, Hud, Yusuf, Rad, Ibrahim. La, Ibrahim is more. Hijr. How many ayat in Surah Hijr?
99.
99. هذه 100 أم لا؟
لا.
تدخل أم لا؟
قد تدخل.
قد ولا تدخل. طيب. Everybody with me? Moving forward to the next section. The next section, An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala then says, وهو ما كان في السورة منها 100 آية ونحوها. He says in the Watul Mi'in, those that have 100, or surahs that have either 100 verses or nahwuha. Maybe give or take. But definitely not 200. Definitely not what? 200. 200 we're taking into a different weight class. That's another way of breaking it down, like boxers. Heavyweight, flyweight, bantamweight, middleweight, welterweight. It's different classes. Everybody clear on this? Everybody understand this? Everybody with me or not? No. Tell you. Because if it was of 200, at least it would take it into a what? Into the what? The long 7. The what? The long 7. So the Watul Mi'in could be 115, 100 and maybe 150.
Yeah.
Everyone understand this or not? It's definitely not what? Close towards what? 200. Everybody clear on this? An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, ثُمَّ الْمَثَانِي. And then we have the next section, which is called what? Al-Mathani. ايش هي؟ ايش هي؟ ايش المثاني؟
الأقل من 100.
Less than 100, he says. مثل? Such as? Abdul Raqib. Such as what? Zumar. We go that far? What's the last thing that we stopped in?
الحجرات.
Slow down. Before we go that far. Alright, let's go back to the beginning. We said how many? 7 long. And the 7 long are basically what? Over 200. Over what? Clear. Next is what? The what? Al-Mi'in. Those that have from 100 to Mathalan. How many surahs is that? Or are those? How many surah? From after the 7, Al-Anfal is surah 8, correct? Until when? When does that stop?
14?
To 14?
Until, 15.
To 15? 8 to 15? So surah 16, An-Nahl, that's how many verses?
123.
So something isn't what?
123.
What's meant by Al-Mathani? He says less than 100. Such as what? Ibrahim. If we're going to Isra, we're debating on 16. It's definitely not what? Ibrahim, you're going back. Tayyib. Everybody understand this? Tayyib. Anybody else before we move forward? An-Nawawi rahimahullah, he says, ثُمَّ الْمُفَصَّل. And then it's called what? Al-Mufassal, which goes from where? Qaf to the end of the Mus'haf, end of the Quran, in the book. Everybody understand this? And then the Mufassal itself is what? Aywa. And to how many parts? Number 1 is what? The first part is called what? Huh? La, you're eating dust, a dust sandwich, Mukhtar. Tiwal al-Mufassal. Exactly. The long what? From Qaf to? Alright, long Mufassal. After the long Mufassal is what? The middle Mufassal, and then the last part is the what? Qisar al-Mufassal, which starts and ends where? Definitely ends at Nas, we know that. Shamsi wa duhaha, he says. A huge difference between قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ قُلْ هُوَ أَحَدٌ and وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا. Huge number. A difference between the size of those. We can agree on that or not? Tahib? The Mufti head nod, right? As we say. Everybody agree on that or not? Tahib. So this is a simple, quick, brief, rush discussion of what? No, the whole concept, akhi, of the entire Quran from beginning to end, not just the Mufassal part. Clear on that? Nawawi rahimahullah, he says, وَقَدْ سَبَقَ بَيَانُ الْخِلَافِ فِي أَوَّلِ الْمُفَصَّل. He says, we previously mentioned what the ulama say regarding when does the Mufassal begin.
يصير from الحجرات some علماء.
هذا الذي
نعم.
نريد ذكره الآن. قد
بعض العلماء يصير from الحجرات عند
راح نشوف.
الناس.
قال رحمه الله فقيل من القتال. Some say it starts at Surah Al-Qital, the chapter of what? Fighting. That's what it says. There's no watering down the Quran. The Surah of what?
محمد.
Not Dawah. It says what? Of fighting. Right? Which is also called Surah Muhammad. Why is some of them call it fighting? Nobody knows. Allah musta'an. Allah musta'an. So I gotta travel soon, huh? Subhanallah. So some say that it starts where? Surah Muhammad. Surah Muhammad is number what, Mukhtar? Ha. وقيل من الحجرات. And others say, كما أفاده أخونا, is that it starts when where? Al-Hujurat, which is number 49. That's the beginning of the Mufassal. And others, they say وقيل من قاف. And some say it starts where? Surah Qaf. And from Qaf to the end, Hujurat to the end, Muhammad to the end, is all called what? Mufassal. And Mufassal is then categorized into 3 smaller categories. So one can say the Sunnah is to recite Qisar al-Mufassal and this, Tiwal al-Mufassal and that. Once you have a gauge and a scale, then you determine what is and what isn't recommended and preferable to recite in which what? Salah. Everyone understand the fa'idah? And this is just a small taste of ulum al-Quran, as we explained last week. That every single Muslim should have a what? Basic understanding of. Every single Muslim should have a basic understanding of ulum al-Quran. Tayyib. So first and foremost is what Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, or what the man said. He says, قَرَأْتُ الْمُفَصَّلَ اللَّيْلَةَ فِي رَكْعَةٍ. He says, I read al-Mufassal tonight in 1 rak'ah. Does he mean all of those surahs from Hujurat to Nas in 1 rak'ah? And then Ibn Mas'ud said, you recited it like fast poetry. كَهَذَا الشِّعْرِ. Just flew through it. For you to recite all of those surahs in what? 1 rak'ah. And he went on to explain that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ did not do that, but the Prophet would do what? Yaqrin of those mufassal surahs. The first rak'ah was this, and the second one was that. Everyone understand how the hadith is now clear? It's 10 times easier, and instead of just saying you can't recite this because you don't know what's what. Everyone understand this? Even though it's permissible in certain instances and in certain situations to recite the longer surahs in the salah. The Prophet ﷺ recited Al-A'raf, which is one of the long 7 in Surah Al-Maghrib. Also, he recited Wat-Tur in what? Salat Al-Maghrib. It doesn't always have to be a short what? Surah. Just like Salat Al-Fajr and other prayers don't always have to be what? Long. It's permissible to recite a short surah. That's not the preferred sunnah, but it's what? Permissible. Everyone understand this now? طيب. Khairan inshallah. Seems like we took a lot tonight, huh? Give everybody some time to go home, to look into it, to break it down inshallah. Come back fresh tomorrow. Allah